Since it's the holiday season and many Santa parks around the world have existed over the years, it's time for a somewhat happier extinct story with the history of the first franchise set of theme parks in the world, one opening before Disneyland itself, Santa's Village.
You can see Santa in the summertime because right now he's at Santa's Village in the San Bernardino Mountains. 13 big rides provide fun for the whole family. Visit the petting zoo, see Santa's reindeer. There's food and treats from the Pixie Pantry and the Good Witch's Bakery and lots more. Santa's Village is fun, forest, and fantasy, all rolled into one. Santa's Village in the cool and clear San Bernardino Mountains.
Santa's Village was the idea of one man who did not get to enjoy Christmas growing up. Glenn Holland had grown up in California during the Great Depression. His parents passed away when he was 18 years old, requiring him to take care of his younger sister. After having his own children, he dreamed that they would never have the type of Christmas he did, but got to experience the one he had seen so many others enjoy. In the early 1950s, after hearing of a similar idea called North Pole, he sat and sketched out the idea for a Christmas fairyland, where all the magic of the Christmas holiday could come to life. Inspired by this idea, he began to search for investors to make it a reality. He travelled the country promoting his Santa Village concept and created the Santa's Village Corporation. Around the same time, Walt Disney was in the process of building Disneyland, and the two men even corresponded about the idea. Unlike the well-known Walt Disney though, Holland was an unknown. Just like Walt, Glenn Holland insisted that the theme presentation was the most important aspect. The first Santa's Village would open in 1955. Just 6 weeks before Disneyland, also in California, this one was located in Sky Forest near Lake Arrowhead, around 80 miles east of Los Angeles, and would try and appeal to people of all ages. On 230 acres of natural forest, the 15-acre park featured historic log cabin restaurants and shops, character experiences, and North Pole-themed attractions, including a monorail and Ferris wheel, a petting zoo, and live reindeer. Over the years, rides came and went, including a candy cane coaster. The park was incredibly detailed, and even money would not change hands within the park. A passport ticket was used to track guest expenses within the park. Throughout, there were brightly coloured mushrooms and toadstools. This was because in Norwegian legend, the craftsmen related to pixies and owls lived in toadstools and mushrooms, and Holland wanted to give all of Santa's helpers a place to live in his fictional village. The opening day of the first Santa's Village was May 28, 1955, and was a huge success, with a line of cars going up the mountain to the location of the new themed attraction, extending all the way down to the city limits 20 miles below. At first, the park was open year-round. Later in the park's life, it would open on weekends for 9 months, being closed in April, May, and June, before opening full-time over the Christmas season. The monorail within the park was a small suspended system which, while unremarkable from a technical view, had some interesting history. It was constructed in 1962 by American Crane and Hoist, and this system was the testbed for the larger scale suspended monorail at the 1964 New York World's Fair.
The answer is the monorail ride, a short version of the experimental transportation method that these scouts may someday see on a regular basis.
Originally, reindeers were allowed to roam the park freely to meet guests, but it ended with one of them unsurprisingly bit the hand of a child. Holland was friends with Dick and Mac McDonald, who told them about the business idea for a chain of fast food restaurants. This inspired Holland to create a franchise of his parks. Due to the success of the original park, the second Santa's Village was planned near Scotts Valley in Santa Cruz County, south of San Francisco, California, opening 2 years later in 1957. Leasing the land from a dairy farm, the park also opened on Memorial Day, with Danish native Carl Henson playing Santa. He would eventually go on to play the clown Hocus Pocus on children's TV for over 10 years. Elves, pixies and gnomes greeted you as you visited the brand new Santa's Village, which again featured puppet shows and petting zoos and plenty of entertainment, including an Alice in Wonderland maze. Entrance to the park was free, and many of these offerings could be enjoyed by anyone visiting. The only costs were for the rides, which were operated by the Owls, including the bobsled roller coaster, which had been manufactured in the 50s and found its way to the park, the spinning snowball ride, which was later removed and rethemed under the log flume on the Santa Cruz boardwalk, Buildings in the new park included an Alf toy factory, lollipop tree, and plenty of gift shops. Santa himself would do meet and greets and had a large mailbox to accept the letters from children around the world. With the success of the first and second Santa's villages, Holland began looking for a third location in the Midwest. He decided on the Chicago area, specifically around 45 minutes northwest of the city.
Acres of rides and attractions, one low admission price, worlds of fun at Santa's Village.
Come on out to Santa's Village, come on out today.
Dundee, Illinois was a small town surrounded by cornfields and forests. A newly completed tollway connected the small suburb to Chicago. In April 1958, the company entered into a 50-year lease on 40 wooded acres of the McGraw's Wildlife Foundation. The same September, ground was broken on the third park. For a cost of $1 million and in less than 9 months, the park was built, again opening on Memorial Day 1959 to huge crowds. Among the usual offerings for the park was Santa and his elves, petting zoos, and even the highlight penny peck and educational chicken. Here, children could also ride a sleigh pulled by real reindeer. It had the staple twirling Christmas tree ride, or take in the multiple entertainment offerings of the familiar-looking park. All of the parks remained mostly the same until early 1962, when a large plan to create new attractions for the park was drawn up by Arrow Development of California, best known at the time for building rides for Disneyland. The first ride created was the aforementioned Snowball Ride, which had been installed at both Chicago and Scotts Valley locations. The biggest addition to the park's history in Dundee, though, was the addition of the Polar Dome project, and a huge undertaking for the Santa Village Corporation. Parts of the park's original layout had to be removed to make room for the 40,000 square foot ice arena. The dome opened to national reviews, seating 4,000 people. It was the largest air-supported dome stadium in the world. Top-name acts appeared at the dome, and the national speed skating competition was even held in the arena. The parks were even featured in various movie shorts in the 60s, including in 1954 Santa Claus and His Helpers, and again in 1966 with Santa Claus's Magic Kingdom. While the big expansions were happening throughout the Illinois park, Holland had miscalculated the park's operating season. The two parks in California at this time would operate 360 days a year, and the Dundee park had started out this way, but the Chicago winter weather was so unbearable and unpredictable during the winter months that attendance was low. The Santa Village Park in Dundee became a Christmas park that was closed during the Christmas season. Holland had planned for the Dundee Park to be the hub of a nationwide chain of villages, with 2 more planned for Richmond, Virginia and Cherry Hill, New Jersey that were never built, but this new park was the one that started their downfall.
And to make Santa feel at home, each village has a North Pole of real ice.
Financial difficulties began to follow. 1965 saw the end of Santa's Village Corporation in Illinois. Holland had sold the park and its assets to Adventureland owner Darrell Everding. Adventureland had opened in 1961, not too far away, and that was the end of the first chapter of Santa Village Park near Chicago. At this time, investors in the corporation rebelled and Holland actually left the company. The Scotts Valley location was purchased but leased back to Santa Village Corporation and continued to operate alongside the original park. The new owners of the Chicago park continued to adapt and grow the park, and the park operated from May to October, with the ice arena operating from September to April, making the operation year-round. He planned to add rides to attract older guests, and it worked. The heydays of the Polar Dome ended though when a storm raced through the area, tearing open the inflatable dome roof, which was then remodeled with a flat roof. The early 1970s saw the passing of Darrell Everding, and a group of investors purchased the park. To help continue the park, they would aim to develop it with the same direction, but with a new name: Worlds of Fun Theme Park. The worlds inside were Santa World, the original area of the park, Old MacDonald's Farm, and the Coney Island section of new larger rides. The name never caught on though, and another theme park in Kansas City used a similar name, so the park was once again renamed, becoming the 3 Worlds of Santa's Village. In 1978, the park once again found itself for sale.
Even though I'm a big person, I'm just a kid at heart, and that's why I'm at Three Worlds at Santa's Village. Boy, do they have fun rides. Rides for little people and big people. See how much the animals like me?
This time, two McHenry County businessmen took over the park and named themselves the North Pole Corporation. They wanted to make some bold changes and planned to add a water park called Racing Rapids. The water park was one of the first in the Midwest and opened in 1983. The following years during the 80s and 90s saw new record growth in attendance and added new exciting rides like the Galaxy roller coaster, with continued expansion of previous areas of the park. 1998 saw the addition of the park's first looping roller coaster, Typhoon, which was delayed a year and launched to a negative response. 5 years later saw the name shortened back to Santa's Village Theme Park.
Typhoon was just fantastic.
Looping, twisting, spinning fun.
It was awesome!
It's the new and now running Typhoon at Santa's Village.
2 thumbs up.
Can you tame it?
It was cool!
May of 2004 saw the park hit 45 years of operation, welcoming visitors from 5 generations. The same year, a Chicago real estate firm purchased the land on which the park sat. It reopened in 2005 for the 46th and final season. The park's land lease was set to expire in 2008, and a group of businessmen from Dundee attempted to buy the land so the park would for the first time own the land it sat on. In June 2006, the deal was in default. A few months later, the court handed down judgments against both the companies owning the park and those buying the land, evicting them both. An auction was held for the non-fixed assets, and the park's infrastructure stayed in place before finally being listed for sale in 2007. Over the next few years, many attempts were made to reopen Santa's Village, and many different people and ideas were proposed, even moving the location of the park, but nothing came from it. The Polo Dome was used for small sporting events and flea markets over these years. Going back in time to the fate of the other parks, in 1977 the Santa Village Corporation filed for bankruptcy. The second park in Scotts Valley was renamed by the landowner as the Village, promoting arts and craft fairs. 2 years later though, the second Santa's Village closed forever. Since 1985 the property changed hands multiple times, and finally in 1992, now owned by Borland International, the buildings were torn down to make room for its headquarters. Some of the buildings were actually sold and used as cabins at Sorensen's Resort near Lake Tahoe. The only remnant today in the area are the highway exit signs and the road called Santa's Village Road. As for the original park, following the bankruptcy, the Henk family, who owned the land and had been leasing it, took over the park's operation in 1978 and added some classic rides to the park, which began drawing around 180,000 guests per year. The original park lasted another 20 years until reduced attendance and revenue caused the park to close on March 1st, 1998. A few years later, the property sold for $5.6 million to Thomas Plott, owner of the Plott Family Care Centres in the area. He planned to reopen the park and refurbish some of the buildings, but that is as far as he got before he passed away, and the land was left abandoned up the mountain. In August 1998, the non-fixed items were auctioned off to a huge crowd attending. To this day, you can still see the mushrooms from the park all over the mountain from the people who bought them, but atop the rim of the World Highway, a ghost town sat. In 2003, one of the worst wildfires in California history burnt most of the surrounding area, and the land was leased to a logging agency who stored and processed millions of infested logs at the location. Though this is an expedition extinct, since it's the holiday season, it will be a shame to end this one with multiple abandoned and forgotten parks, and this time with a bit of Christmas magic, only one of these parks never reopened again. The original park was sold in 2014 after years of being abandoned to a new owner who planned to operate it as a year-round tourism destination again, now called Sky Park at Santa's Village. After renovations of 18 original buildings and restoring the surrounding area, the outdoor adventure park reopened on December 2nd, 2016, another 20 years after the original park closed. The Santa's Village near Chicago was also reborn. Jason Seopian worked at Santa's Village in the early 1990s. Working in the barn area, he later formed his own animal-based business, A Zoo to You. In 2010, they needed more space and contracted to lease space at the closed Santa's Village. Part of the original property was being developed as a paintball facility, with the original Polar Dome ice rink being converted to an indoor paintball field. It also had 6 outdoor fields reusing the old park structures. The other half, where most of the other buildings stood, would return as a new concept. An amusement park. Combining his petting zoo with rides and educational shows, the park began to rebuild and by 2010 was ready to reopen as Santa's Village Amusement Park. While none of these parks exist today in their original forms, the rebirth of 2 of them continues the spirit of Christmas for families to enjoy for years to come, sticking to that original vision by the creator of the first theme park franchise. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Expedition Extinct. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe to join the expedition and let me know in the comments below where you would like to go on future episodes. A special thank you to our Patreons for supporting the channel, and I hope you have a magical holiday season.